Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to check in on whether or not I achieved my anti-goals of 2024. In 2023, I read too much and I was broken, and so I set anti-goals for 2024. These were things that I did want to achieve, but I wanted to achieve them based on things I'd achieved in 2023, so they were kind of like anti-goals. Rather than goals, I wanted to not do stuff. And so these are whether or not I did them or not. It feels weird to achieve anti-goals, but I suppose that's where we are. There were only 7 of them, so I think I'll be able to whiz through this. So my first anti-goal was that I wanted to read less. Specifically in my video, I said I wanted to read less than 224 books, which is what I read in 2023, because that was too much. And I achieved this anti-goal. I only read 170 books in 2024, which is not an only. I don't know why I put only in front of that. 170 books is still a lot, but it's less than 224, which was the point. I said I wanted to read 150 specifically. I wanted to read around that mark, and to be fair, I'm cheating a little bit. It's 170 without rereads. I didn't count my rereads. Either which way, even with rereads, it's less than 224 books. So that is done, and I'm happy that I read less. I'm happy I read less, and I did take it easy with my reading. There was no pressure, and that was wonderful. My second anti-goal was that I didn't want to read as many short things. I wanted to focus on reading some of my longer books, and I specified I wanted to read some of my classics, I wanted to read some of my sci-fi books that were big, and I wanted to read some of my fantasy books. The biggest book that I read in 2024 was 928 pages long, and that was Exodus by Peter F. Hamilton, so I definitely achieved the fact of taking time to read some super chunky books. But some other chunky books that I read were Wolf's Song, Raven's Song, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, The Songbird and the Heart of Stone, and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. Those were all also very big books. I read Swordcatcher, that was chunky. In terms of big classics, I read Great Expectations and I read A Tale of Two Cities. I also read quite a few other classics. I just wanted to read classics, and those weren't as long, but they were still classics. I also read loads of other fantasy books, so I definitely read a lot more of the chunky fantasy and sci-fi and classics that I'd been delaying because they just take longer to read. So that was nice. The third thing that I wanted to do was reread more. I did this in spades. I didn't want to only just focus on decreasing my TBR, so I wanted to take the time to reread books that I really loved. And in the video I specified some of the classics that I tend to reread. Classics. I tend to reread, by the way, I meant Twilight and the Raven Cycle. Those classics, you know. But in the end I didn't reread any of those because I got stuck rereading books that I read for the first time in 2024, but then enjoyed so much that I couldn't stop rereading them. So I reread Wolf's Song and Raven's Song by TJ Klune multiple times, and I reread Sarah Simone a lot, like a lot. There was not a single month where I didn't reread at least one Sarah Simone novel, and at some point I was rereading Sarah Simone one book a reread a week, so I did quite a lot of rereading. And then in terms of classics, I reread Sense and Sensibility. That was the only one, but I had so much fun rereading Sense and Sensibility. I reread it through audio, and I would like to repeat that. I would like to reread some of the classics that I've read physically before through audio as a fun experience. Oh, and I also reread For Real by Alexis Hall. That used to be the book that I reread the most alongside Twilight, so it was really fun to reread that one again. My other anti-goal was to read according to mood. This was a of the way that I was not reading according to mood. I was reading so that I would have varied reading wrap-ups, and I did. I mood read, and it was actually very interesting when I looked back on my reading year. I read a lot more sci-fi, fantasy and romance than usual, and I'm someone who typically really enjoys a good sad book and a lot of grief books, but I didn't gravitate to that at all last year, and I think it's because I had some grieving to do, so you don't always want to read books about grief while you're grieving because it's quite hard. And then I was going through different things at different points, and so I think I needed happy books. It wasn't a hard year, I don't think. It wasn't a hard year, but it was a stressful year. That's what I would say. It was a stressful and a really busy year. And so I think I just needed easy, escapist reads to help me through. But that's not gonna be my turn in 2025. I miss my sad books, I miss my grief books, I miss a bit more of the literary fiction, so I'm hoping to get back into that. Another thing I wanted to do was read multiple books at once. This was a from the fact that I was limiting how many books I could multi-read, and I just multi-read like I always do. So I read to my heart's content, and so I did read multiple books at once all the time. I do that anyway, and that was a very easy one for me to achieve. I love that I set myself some easy goals. The next one, 6, was to DNF more books. This is just one that I'd done before, and it was an anti-goal I wanted to continue, and I continued. I DNF'd merrily and happily and plenty. There's only 1 month where I should have DNF'd more, but otherwise I DNF quite a lot and quite frequently. If you know about my unhauls, you'll see all of the DNFs that I do, and I talk about why I DNF things, and so I will continue to bring that energy in 2025 as well. My last anti-goal was to not consider my TBR number, not at all, not at any point, because I'd done a TBR challenge all through 2023 and I didn't want my TBR size to restrict me from book buying or from hauling in, and I will say that I achieved this as well. It's not that I didn't think about my TBR at all, because halfway through the year I did feel like my TBR was getting a bit much, and actually the 2025 TBR challenge that I'm currently on was created around June or May 2024. So halfway through the year I was like, oh my gosh, my TBR is out of control, and I made a whole TBR challenge, and then I just saved it and put it to the side, and I didn't think about it anymore until it was about time for me to start doing it. So I think I did a very good job of seeing that my TBR was getting out of control, but still sticking to my anti-goal and still just being allowed to buy books as much as I wanted to. That said, in 2024 I didn't buy that many books. I had actually quite a few gift cards throughout the year. They're such lovely presents to receive, and so I didn't actually spend much of my own money on books at all. It was mostly me spending the gift cards that I received, and then receiving books as either gifts or through work, because I work in publishing, or as a content creator. So I'm actually quite happy that I barely spent any money on books last year, any of my own money on books last year, and mostly if I spent money on books I was giving them as gifts to other people, which is nice. And so I don't actually think, I'm not going to say I didn't grow my TBR, because let's be honest, it's still me, it's still always me, but my TBR grew a lot, but also not because I was spending crazy amounts of money, which is great. So I did achieve this. I didn't worry too much about my TBR, but my TBR is out of control and I am worrying about it this year. Not worrying about it, I am solving it with my TBR challenge this year. And so actually 7 out of 7 of my anti-goals were done! Woo! Yay! We killed it! We killed it! We did all the anti-goals. Yes! So let's see. I set my 2025 wishes, and so I will not really be thinking about them too much, and we'll see if I achieve them at the end of the year or not. This was a great outcome personally, but I don't think it always, works out this way where everything gets done. So please let me know in the comment section down below, did you like the idea of anti-goals? Did you manage to achieve some of the goals or things or resolutions or wishes that you set yourself in 2024? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and for you to join me along on my TBR challenge in 2025. You know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!